Everything that we've discussed for the last 20 minutes suggests that the claim repeatedly made by the Modi government, a claim repeatedly made by the Lieutenant Governor in Srinagar, that normalcy has been more or less restored in Jammu and Kashmir, is simply false.
It's absolutely 100% false. It's something that feeds into this sort of false narrative of being on the brink of victory and being on the brink of wiping out terrorism. It's something that imbues your troops with overconfidence that leads to casualties, and those casualties lead to a reality which is frightening to contemplate, which is that the handful of terrorists in Jammu and Kashmir are taking on the Indian army. It's something that we really need to stop and to tackle on priority.
Despite the fact we have 1.5 lakh soldiers on the line of control and it's effectively fenced, Pakistani terrorists are periodically able to infiltrate and carry out terrorist attacks in India. How much of this is because of what you said to me last night, that quite often the terrorists end up being smarter than us?
Yeah, they are. Whenever this happens, it's always attributed to security failure, intelligence failure. It happens all over the world. Let me put it like that.
But your main point you're making is that this sort of thing happens because the terrorists are smarter than us.
Yeah, they are. Obviously, that's how they get it.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. It seems that over the last 6 months, terror-related incidents in Jammu and Kashmir happen once a week, sometimes even twice a week. On Tuesday, 28 people were killed in Pahalgam. The very next day, Wednesday, there were 2 further incidents in Baramulla and Kulgam. Yet we have perhaps 1.5 lakh soldiers on the line of control, a total of 3 lakh security of various types within Jammu and Kashmir, and the line of control is said to be effectively fenced. So why are Pakistani terrorists able to periodically cross over and carry out terror attacks on Indian soil? That's the key issue I should raise today. My first guest is a former colonel of the army and one of the most highly regarded security analysts, Ajai Shukla. Colonel Shukla, let me start with a simple and blunt question. We have 1.5 lakh soldiers on the line of control, a total of 3 lakh security of various types within Jammu and Kashmir, and the LOC is said to be effectively fenced. How then can Pakistani terrorists cross over periodically and carry out terror attacks on our side?
Two points I would make to answer your question. The first is that there is an effective body of terrorists, militants, armed people, choose what you want to call them. An armed body of them exist and are operating within the borders of this country in Jammu and Kashmir. Now, these people they're already there. They are ready to carry out any sort of attacks that are ordered by their handlers in the inter-services intelligence, by their group handlers within the groups that they come from, the Lashkar-e-Toiba, the Jaish-e-Mohammed, and so on. So each time you hear about a fresh terrorist attack, as we have very sadly heard about it day before yesterday, it does not mean that these people who perpetrated this attack have infiltrated across the line of control just for the purpose of this particular attack. They could very well be that the handlers on the Pakistan side of the line of control said that a group from the Lashkar-e-Toiba, which is already over there, will be carrying out this attack. And that group is then put into action and the attack takes place. It gives the impression that there are a large number of terrorists coming and going across the line of control. But in fact, it could well be that they are the same people who are carrying out multiple attacks.
So in other words, there is a body or a group of terrorists who've come across earlier, have situated themselves within the Indian side of the line of control and are carrying out attacks. And they've remained undetected all the while. That in itself is pretty worrying.
It is very worrying, and it's a direct function of the degree of support that is enjoyed amongst these terrorists, amongst the people of the valley and the people of Jammu. It means that they are granted shelter, they are given safe houses within the villages, or at times within one particular house. They may have an underground sort of chamber which is dug, and where the terrorists sort of ensconce themselves and come out to do attacks. Yes, the fact is that they are there and they are supported by the people. And as long as that support is forthcoming from amongst the people, it will be very difficult to flush all of them out.
So you're saying again something that is disturbing. Not only is there a fairly large body of terrorists who are already in India and remain undetected and can carry out terror attacks almost when they want, but they also enjoy a certain measure of support from the local people who are, in a way, helping them remain undetected and also feeding them.
They are being fed, they are being housed, they are being clothed. They are at times the people from within the village where this is happening join up with them, train with them, and even enter into operations with them. So this is not something which is new. This has been happening for a very long time, and in all places where you have terrorists and militants fighting the armed forces of that particular union, you will have this phenomenon of support being given to them from the local people.
Let's go back to my original question. Even these terrorists who have crossed over earlier and are now, in a sense, living in India and carrying out their operations from within India, even they would have at some point crossed over. And when they did, they were undetected. Why is it that when we have 1.5 lakh soldiers on the line of control, a total of 3 lakh security of various types within the Union territory, and the LOC is said to be effectively fenced, why is it that Pakistani terrorists can come across?
For the simple reason, Karan, that there is no foolproof fence in the world. The closest any country has got to fencing itself off from its neighbors is Israel, and even their fence with southern Lebanon, where the Hezbollah sort of is kept at bay by the fences. Even that fence is at times breached, and terrorists come and carry out operations. So when we say that there's this very effective fence with all kinds of electronics, all kinds of seismic sensors, all kinds of generations and lights and power points and so on, we are saying that we have a very effective fence, and it keeps at bay most terrorists and militants, but not all of them.
Tell me, let's talk about that fence. How effective is it, or does it need significant improvement and more resources?
It is, if one was to say or put a sort of a number to it, I would say, roughly speaking, that it keeps at bay something like 70% to 80% of all terrorists. This is the fence was first conceived and put into place at the time when General Vij was the chief of army staff. This would be around 2005 or so, and at that time it was, when it was compared with the concept of no fence at all, or just relying on on ambushes and so on to keep the Pakistani terrorists at bay, it was considered to be a very effective option. And given that it was keeping 70 to 80% of terrorists at bay, it was comparatively a good option. But over the years, the terrorists have developed their techniques. They have developed ways of crossing the fence. There have been demonstrations made by Indian troops on how easy it is to actually cross a fence. You have a small group coming with a ladder. The ladder is put on top of the fence and the other end on the ground. They shimmy up the ladder, come to the top, and pull the ladder across the other side. And in a matter of 2 minutes, you find a group of 4 people have crossed the fence. So this is it's better than nothing. But Karan, nobody will try and sell you the idea that 100% of all troops can be, of all terrorists can be
But
kept.
even your figures are actually disturbing, because if 20 to 30% of terrorists are not deterred by the fence and can cross over, and if the example you're giving me of the ease with which they can bring a ladder, shimmy up the ladder and pull the ladder and come down the other side is an accurate reflection, then this is very worrying, because clearly for 2025, this is now an inadequate fence.
This is absolutely correct. We should be worried by it. We should be looking for more sort of modern methods, for more sort of lethal methods to stop people from actually breaching or even approaching the fence. But we are not there yet, no.
Generals that I've been speaking to off the record tell me that for at least 10 years, but maybe longer, we have been talking about a new improved fence. 10 years is a very long time, yet that new improved fence hasn't happened. Is that a certain measure of irresponsibility on our part?
Oh, well, I wouldn't endorse or rebut the figures, but I can tell you this with a high degree of certainty. The fence is not a foolproof device. It is merely a deterrent. It is a deterrent that has worked to some extent, but as your generals told you, it is time for a better, modern, more lethal a fence that actually deters and keeps the terrorists at bay.
What about the response of the soldiers to an attempt at infiltration? Do we need better mechanisms, improved tactics for how to react when an attempt at infiltration occurs?
I think that almost every unit that is stationed on the line of control develops its tactics, tries to think of better ways of making its fence more effective, and all of them in some way contribute and do actually result in better fences. But Karan, it's a mug's game. You know, you develop a method to keep the person at bay. The other side develops a method to counter that, and this back and forth takes place. I think that the correct way to approach it would be to get larger numbers of troops, to get more modern methods of making the fence more effective, electronically receptive. And the deterrent value of that fence has been eroded over time. It needs to be increased.
Now, Colonel Shukla, the impression one gets is that over the last 6 months, terror-related incidents have happened in Jammu and Kashmir once a week, sometimes even twice a week. It's been 3 in the last 2 days. Yesterday, after Pahalgam, there was an incident in Baramulla and yet another one in Kulgam. Doesn't this indicate that something has gone wrong, or at least that we're not doing things properly?
I would not say use the word wrong and improperly. I would agree with you that we need to change something. We need to make the fence more sort of formidable in its deterrent value. And as I mentioned before, we are doing that. The units on the line of control are doing that. But it's not at the level at which it can be sort of called anything as effective or as deterrent in its value as the Israeli fence. And we're working with the Israelis. We have been working with the Israelis for many years now in order to make the fence more effective. But Yeah, there's still wait.
Is the problem political and a failure to provide adequate financial resources? Or is it that there isn't agreement at the officer level about what improvements are needed?
I would sort of hesitate to answer that question, but I would agree with you to the extent that there is a need to do something. It is not being done or been done so far. Whether it was because of a political angle to the whole thing, whether it was because the sort of monetary investment that would go into making a more effective fence is there with the troops or not. But I think with each of these attacks that takes place, Uri, Pathankot, Pulwama, and now this latest heinous perpetration, I think we become more and more convinced of the need to have a more effective method. It's just that it's not being put into place. The reason I will not even speculate upon.
Let's for a moment, Colonel Shukla, focus on Pahalgam. Would you accept that what happened on Tuesday in Pahalgam illustrates both intelligence failure as well as an absence of security? This is an open meadow, and quite a large number of tourists were taken there, but there was no security for them. And clearly, that this was likely to happen is something we should have been aware of at the back of our mind, and therefore security should have been provided. So does Pahalgam illustrate both intelligence failure and an absence of security? And if the answer is yes or partly yes, is that a result of overconfidence or complacency affecting our attitudes? Because we've been telling ourselves for a while that Kashmir is near normalcy. Is that affecting our attitude and our response?
Well, this is a hard question for me to answer honestly, but yes, I think the answer is yes. I think that there is now a sort of a degree of overconfidence in some sections of the troops that are on the line of actual control. They want to be the ones, they want to be the unit that gets there and foils a bid, an infiltration bid, or creates a big sort of number of kills on the militant group that they are pursuing. I think that the sort of carefully considered military operations that we should be doing, the sort of the care that we should be taking to ensure that no casualties are caused on our troops, that is being eroded, and that getting that eroded over time is very, very harmful to the troops, not just because of the fact that somebody's relative, somebody's husband, father is being killed, but also because of the fact that it gives confidence to the militants. It makes them feel that they are strong enough to cause casualties on the mighty Indian army. And that's a feeling that you should never allow to creep into your enemy, especially in counterinsurgency operations. So I think we really need to work on this.
Earlier in this interview, at some length, you talked about the nature of local support. They're housed, they're fed, they're protected. Sometimes they're even provided guides. How worrying is the local support that the terrorists can avail of?
It is very worrying. And when you have an incident, why was that killing of Burhan Iwani such a landmark in the counterinsurgency operations in Kashmir? It was such a landmark because it emboldened the local people to sort of come out in support, in open support of a terrorist. It sort of gave them the impression and gave them the confidence that they would be able to come out, face up with the Indian army and cause casualties on the Indian army, and then become a hero and a martyr when you die. All of these things are aspects of human psychology that you really do not want creeping into your enemy in a counterinsurgency zone. It's something that I have been noting growing in sort of in size and in tempo, and it's something that Karan, you put it very well yourself. It's something that needs to be stopped.
You've referred to the psychology and the need for us to be aware of the impact of the psychology of the people 2 or 3 times in this interview. Is that an aspect of counterterrorism that we don't pay enough attention to? That we often end up emboldening the very people who we want to make debilitated?
I am sort of sadly constrained to say that yes, I think what you're saying is absolutely correct. These people who join the army, who train at the Indian Military Academy and the National Defense Academy, and who become officers in fine units with records of centuries of combat and records of bravery, are eager to go and get into combat and to put put paid to any terrorists that are operating in their zone. They believe that's their job, and they believe they have the confidence to execute that job. But all sort of counterinsurgency forces all over the world are taught one thing at the beginning, that you have to be extremely cautious. You have to make sure that you don't get the opponents overconfident or even confident that they can take you on in combat. And if you sort of fail on any of these counts, you will find that the balance of sort of the psychological power and the confidence goes the other direction rather than towards the forces.
Finally, Colonel Shukla, my last question. Doesn't everything that we've discussed for the last 20 minutes suggest that the claim repeatedly made by the Modi government, a claim repeatedly made by the Lieutenant Governor in Srinagar, that normalcy has been more or less restored in Jammu and Kashmir, is simply false?
It's absolutely 100% false. It's something that feeds into this sort of false narrative of being on the brink of victory and being on the brink of wiping out terrorism. It's something that imbues your troops with overconfidence that leads to casualties, and those casualties lead to a reality which is frightening to contemplate, which is that the handful of terrorists in Jammu and Kashmir are taking on the Indian army. It's something that we really need to stop and to tackle on priority.
Colonel Shukla, thank you very much for opening our eyes to the nature, quality, and often inefficiencies of India's capacity to defend itself against periodic Pakistani infiltration.
We have to acknowledge our inefficiencies. That's the word that sort of is anathema to a military soldier. But yes, I agree with you 100%. We have to acknowledge our faults and flaws, and then overcome them.
Colonel Shukla, thank you very much indeed. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you, Karan.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
Welcome back. I'm now joined by the former head of the research analysis wing and one of India's foremost experts on Kashmir, Amarjit Singh Dulat. Mr. Dulat, despite the fact we have 1.5 lakh soldiers on the line of control and it's effectively fenced, Pakistani terrorists are periodically able to infiltrate and carry out terrorist attacks in India. How much of this is because of what you said to me last night, that quite often the terrorists end up being smarter than us?
Yeah, they are. They are. Whenever this happens, it's always attributed to security failure, intelligence failure. It happens all over the world. Let me put it like that. But what happened in Pelgam is worse than the worst, because this sort of thing has never happened in Kashmir. The only other incident I can remember is when during President Clinton's visit, a whole lot of Sikhs were massacred in Chatti Singhpura.
But your main point you're making is
Yeah.
that this sort of thing happens because the terrorists are smarter than us.
Yeah, they are. Obviously, that's how they get it.
Let me quote to you what a senior security official said to the Indian Express this morning, the 24th of April. These terrorists operate in small groups and do not come out of the jungles even in minus 10 degrees Celsius temperature. They don't use any gadgets, so there is no possibility of gathering technical intelligence. Besides, they keep on moving. Doesn't this mean that they can successfully avoid detection?
Yeah, it does mean. I tell you, I've been telling you this before also, Mr. Thapar, that a lot of all this has been happening in Poonch Rajouri area. And that is a very thickly forested area. It's very difficult to man or to get inside there all the time. So there is patrolling, but patrolling can't go on 24/7 all the time, 24 hours. So whenever there is, they find that there is no patrolling or it is quietened down, then they get through. Now the point there in that area is that in the past, the Gujars were the main informers of the army. Now the Gujar has gone quiet, or he is not cooperating so much, because there is a Gujar Pahadi sort of conflict in that area. And this is I don't know, people on the ground should know, but a lot of this is happening through that area. Poonch Rajouri, that...
Let me stop you there, because you're saying two very important things which may not be easy for the audience to understand. So let me separate them. The first thing you're saying is that the terrorists operate in an geographical environment where they are smarter than us and they can avoid detection. Is that right?
That's right.
And the second thing you're saying is, in this area, the local communities are the Gujars and the Bakarwals, and the Gujars have lost their sense of sympathy and support for us, as a result of which our sources of information have dried up.
Yeah, quite a lot of sources have dried up because of, I think, the lack of interest now of the Gujars. Because as I said, it's not the Bakarwal, it's the Gujars and the Pahadis. There's been a conflict there. The feeling among the Gujars is that the government is supporting the Pahadis more. So anyways, that's one issue. But...
and therefore, is it the case that whereas previously we would get information from the Gujars about infiltration happening, with their help and support, we could detect the terrorists who had crossed over, now that information has stopped?
That's right. It's sort of dried up. Let me tell you something. In that area, this had become an industry, So you inform the army or whoever is there of two people who might infiltrate, and then you let in three. So it's always been a game, but the Gujars have been supportive of the army there in the past. And I think that support is not forthcoming now.
So the combination of the terrorists being smarter, having better capacity to avoid detection, and information from the Gujars drying up, the combination of those two has put us at a great disadvantage.
Yes, in that area it has. It has.
Now, you said something else to me when we were talking yesterday. You said often Pakistani terrorists, after they cross over, rest and shelter in Surankot, which you described as a hostile geographic bowl. Does this mean that in the Surankot area, Pakistani terrorists can find a fair degree of local support?
Yeah, there's always been local support in that area, in the Surankot area. It's a bowl there, and it's a difficult area. it's a resting place. It used to be for terrorists, and I think that area is still being used because that's where they come through, and then they climb up and cross the Pir Panjal. Now, once you cross the Pir Panjal, then you can go north or you can go south. And obviously, what has been happening of late is more in the south. You know,
I understand that, but let's stick to Surankot for a moment. You're saying Surankot has become an area where they come and rest and shelter after they've crossed over to the Indian side, and here they get a degree of support.
it hasn't become, it was always there. It has always been a somewhat hostile area. And I mean, if there are three militants crossing over from the Pakistan side, they can get shelter there and then march on and cross the Pir Panjal. That's what happens.
You said something else last night as well when we were talking. You said that a lot of the time you fear that Pakistani terrorists are also able to get what you call patches of local support in the wider Poonch Rajouri area. So they get support in Surankot, but they get some support in Poonch and Rajouri as well.
You see, there has to be local support wherever this happens. And I'm not saying it's in large numbers, it could be just a couple of people. Now, one of the newspapers reported today that if there were 5 terrorists, then 2 of them were Kashmiris who had crossed over to Pakistan and now come back. And they had crossed over maybe 7, 8 years ago. So this kind of thing happens. But, you know, I would plead for Kashmir here because since yesterday, Kashmir has been weeping.
Absolutely. But the newspaper you're quoting is today's Indian Express. The story you're citing is on the front page, and it says that 2 of the 5 terrorists were actually Kashmiris. They'd gone across in 2018. They trained with the LET and Jaish, and now they have come back. So there is not just local support in the sense of support in Surankot, support in Poonch and Rajouri, but there is also local support in the sense of Indian Kashmiris who've gone across to Pakistan, returning with the Pakistani terrorists to help them.
Yeah, but let me make a point here, Mr. Thapar, that local militancy has reduced considerably. And most of the attacks are coming from, from Pakistanis coming from across, whatever name they come by. Now they're calling themselves the Resistance Force, which is an offshoot of the Lashkar or a shadow of the Lashkar, whatever it is.
But the important point you're making, Mr. Dulat, and I'm underlining it because I think it's important that the audience should understand, is that there are 2 factors working, or maybe 3, on the side of the Pakistani terrorists. One, that they can often be smarter than us and they can therefore avoid detection. Secondly, the lie of the land is such that they can hide and not be detected. And thirdly, they do get a measure of local support in areas like Surankot and in parts of Poonch and Rajouri. All 3 factors work to actually make it easier for them and more difficult for us.
Yes. I'd like to make another point here. And that is that, we talk of failure of intelligence. Now, everybody who's operating, every security force in Kashmir has their own intelligence wing. There's a military wing, there's a BSF wing, there's a CRPF wing, every wing. But the most crucial, the most vital, the most important intelligence district is the local intelligence. If that is not forthcoming, if Kashmiri intelligence or the Kashmir special branch is not active enough or not supportive enough, and I think that is something which has to be borne in mind. I want to say one thing more.
And is that the sort of intelligence that has dried up when the Gujars stopped cooperating?
No, I don't know. I'm just making a point here that the most vital intelligence is Kashmiri intelligence, local as well as the police, the special branch, and the local thanas. That is the most important intelligence. That's where crucial intelligence comes from.
And has that sort of intelligence begun to dry up?
I don't know. I'm just wondering. Because, you see, the point I'm trying to make here, Mr. Thabar, is that, as I said, Kashmir has been weeping since yesterday. And this sort of thing has never happened because this is going to affect tourism in a big way. The main industry.
Absolutely. But before we come to that, you've been very explicit in pointing out that in the Surankot area, for a long time, we've lost support. Have we begun to reach out? Have we made any efforts to win back the people in Surankot, Poonch and Rajouri?
I wouldn't know, and I don't know. But it's not just there. It's been happening, all along the Jammu area. I mean, we saw a number of attacks in Katwa. Then it started climbing up. And we had an attack somewhere near Udhampur. And then it went up to Kishtwar. And now it's ended up in Pahalgam. So, this is the route up. And this is also the route of the Yatra. So
and this is also areas where we are losing local support.
I don't know about this area, but the point here is that this from the security point of view, Pahalgam is very heavily manned, by the security forces because of the route of the Yatra. Now, where this happened is a meadow just outside Pahalgam. Why there were no security forces there, I don't know.
Would that be a lapse? Would that be a lapse on our part?
Well, it's a lapse on somebody's part,
It has to be our part.
Yeah, obviously, our part. When I say our part, I want to come back again.
But just a moment, before you start qualifying what you're saying, you believe that there was an intelligence failure as well as a security lapse on our part?
Well, there certainly was a security lapse because if this meadow, which is just outside Pahalgam, the problem here is, and that's why they selected this area, because you have to go on foot, or on ponies. That's why the poniwalas are active there. And it's not easy to go in a vehicle. So I don't know what the reason is, but obviously it was not sufficiently manned or not manned at all, that area.
Has a certain measure of complacency or overconfidence set in? The government keeps claiming that Kashmir is almost back to normalcy. So has a certain measure of overconfidence and complacency set in? Does that explain the security lapse?
You see, let me try and look at it from the government's angle.
No, but answer my question first.
Yeah. What is the question, Mr. Thapar?
Has a certain measure of complacency or overconfidence set in? We keep claiming that Kashmir is back to normal. Has this made us overconfident?
Could be. I don't know, really. I really have no idea. But the point here is, and I want to make this point, that Kashmir and Kashmiris should not suffer for whatever happened yesterday. It's bad enough.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's a different subject, Mr. Dulat. Let's not go on to that. That's a different subject. I want to come back and stick to the subject we're talking about. You said to me yesterday that you're worried that increasingly the incidents of terror that we're seeing in Jammu and Kashmir are becoming what you called Hindu versus Muslim. What leads you to that conclusion?
Well, these terrorists, whatever happened in Pahalgam, they were choosing Hindus to eliminate them. And it was Hindus who were killed. All the tourists were Hindus. And they were looking for Hindus. If there was a Muslim, maybe they would have spared him. So obviously, it's very obvious that this is what is happening there. But again, please let me say this. Yesterday, the chief minister, poor man, went around from place to place to place apologizing. And the point I want to make is that law and order is not under the chief minister's control.
Yes, we know that, Mr. Dulat. Let's stick to the subject we're discussing, which is India's inability to prevent Pakistani terrorists crossing periodically and carrying out terrorist attacks. That's the subject we're discussing. You're now worried that the incidents of terror are taking on a Hindu versus Muslim aspect. Explain to me that polarization will deeply set into the valley.
Well, I hope not, but it's very apparent from what happened yesterday or day before yesterday in Pahalgam that they were looking for Hindus and they killed Hindus. But, I'll tell you the other reason for complacency, possibly, if I can explain it, is that tourists have never been attacked in the past. It's very easy to shoot down 20, 30, 50 tourists in Srinagar, except that it's very difficult to escape them. Here, because of the hilly terrain, they killed these people and just went up into the forest and disappeared. Now we haven't been able to find them. And mostly we are not able to find them.
And you're also therefore suggesting, and correct me if I'm wrong, that by allowing tourists to go to this meadow outside Pahalgam without security, without protection, that is another indication of overconfidence and complacency on our part.
Now, you can't provide a constable for every tourist who comes, So after what has happened in Pahalgam, people will be more careful. In fact,
that's the future. But this time round, there were a large number of tourists in an open meadow without any protection and security. And that you're saying is complacency.
Well, you can say it's complacency because it was not expected. Whenever, and this is all over the world, sir, let me tell you, whenever something goes wrong, it is always complacency or lack of security or lack of intelligence. It's not only in Kashmir or not only in India, it's everywhere.
Tell me something, and I'm going to end with this. We have been in Kashmir with a very large number of security in the way of soldiers on the LOC, in the way of almost 2.5 lakh security of different types within the Union territory. And yet, periodically, Pakistani terrorists are able to infiltrate. Do we need to improve our defenses?
Yeah, I think we need to improve the local intelligence and the local support. That is crucial, that is vital. Without that, it doesn't matter how many soldiers you have where. Unless you have local support and local intelligence, this sort of thing will keep being a problem for us. But if you allow me to make one last plea before we end, and that is that please, for goodness sake, Kashmir is not to blame for this. And the poor Chief Minister and Dr. Farooq wept yesterday. Now the Chief Minister has been going around pleading, apologizing, saying everything that he can possibly say. And he's not responsible.
Absolutely. And no one holds the Chief Minister or the Kashmiri people responsible. Your point is well taken. I thank you for joining me. I thank you in particular for courageously pointing out, and I'm repeating it for the 4th time because I think it's an important point you made, that quite often the terrorists are able to infiltrate because they're smarter than us. Quite often they do so because they can avoid detection. They have the means to do so. Quite often they get the better of us because of the lie of the land and the geography, and also quite often because local support is often on their side, in Surankot in particular, but also in parts of Poonch and Rajouri. And finally, as you say, we need to improve our intelligence because our defenses will never be as good as they should be if our intelligence is poor.
When I say intelligence, I want to repeat. What I'm talking about is Kashmiri intelligence. There's plenty of intelligence. Everybody there is an intelligence officer. But the point is that the most vital intelligence comes from the police station, from Kashmiri officers, from the Kashmir Special Branch. And I think that is what is important.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Dulat. I thank you for joining me. I thank you for courageously and boldly pointing out where our defenses against Pakistani terror are weak and infirm and need to be improved. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.